quiet night on the 7th of May, Indian armed forces carried out a precision military operation across the line of control and the international border, codenamed Operation Sindoor. The mission was swift, lethal, and calibrated. But its significance lies not just in what was destroyed, but in what it signaled to Pakistan and to the rest of the world. For decades, India and Pakistan have been locked in a cycle. From time to time, there's a terrorist attack on Indian soil that is followed by international condemnation. There's a flurry of diplomatic activity. Sometimes there is a punitive reprisal, and always it is followed by a return to the status quo. And then the cycle repeats itself. In 2016, India responded to the Uri attack with surgical strikes. In 2019, Balakot became a turning point when Indian jets crossed the Lakshman Rekha and hit deep inside mainland Pakistan, outside of Kashmir. But even those actions, bold as they were, left one question unanswered. Would the threshold of tolerance ever change? Has India enforced the rules of deterrence vis-à-vis Pakistan and Pakistan-sponsored terrorism? With Operation Sindoor, the answer to that question seems to be yes. India has redrawn the rules. The unwritten rules of engagement between India and Pakistan for many decades now have revolved around plausible deniability. So long as Pakistan could avoid any direct conventional warfare and relied instead on its terror proxies like the Lashkar and the Jaish, it could wage this shadow war without triggering a full-blown response. So terror attacks were treated like actions of non-state actors. The diplomatic song and dance that would follow suited both sides. India could avoid escalation, Pakistan could continue bleeding India by 1,000 cuts. This framework was never really formal between both countries, but it had endured for 30 years. Balakot cracked that framework. Sindoor may have finally broken that framework open. Unlike previous responses, Operation Sindoor went beyond retaliating for just one single act of terror. That one single act was Pahalgam, but Operation Sindoor targeted not just the foot soldiers of cross-border terrorism, but also the infrastructure behind terrorism. Staging grounds, communication hubs, even terror facilities that are adjacent to military protection. Sites like Bahawalpur and Muridke, which are the headquarters of the Jaish and the Lashkar respectively, are next to sprawling military installations. In the past, this would give them a degree of immunity. Not anymore. That level of risk-taking signals a shift in India's military doctrine. India appears to be moving from a policy of strategic restraint to one of active deterrence. In simple terms, India is no longer waiting for these terror attacks to happen. It is declaring that the very act of preparing or enabling terrorism, even if it is by covert means, will be met with real consequences. It is not going to make a distinction between state and non-state actors. Even state actors will be punished for the acts of their non-state brethren.
हम आतंक की सरपरस्त सरकार और आतंक के आकाओं को अलग अलग नहीं देखेंगे। ऑपरेशन सिंदूर के दौरान दुनिया ने पाकिस्तान का वो घिनौना सच फिर देखा है, जब मारे गए आतंकियों को विदाई देने पाकिस्तानी सेना के बड़े बड़े अफसर उमड़ पड़े। स्टेट स्पॉन्सर्ड टेररिज्म का ये बहुत बड़ा सबूत है।
But a red line is only meaningful if a country can enforce that red line. What Operation Sindoor illustrates is India's willingness to do exactly that. By redrawing boundaries in a volatile neighborhood, it's not going to be without a cost. Pakistan, for its part, reacted with a lot of bluster. As expected, it sent in swarms of drones, followed by missiles and aircraft. It is to India's credit, the air defenses proved to be very, very successful against these intruders, that none of those missiles or projectiles or drones was successful. But there was a sudden climbing off the escalation ladder after Pakistan Army Chief General Asim Munir realized on the morning of the 10th of May that India had damaged a dozen of his frontline air bases. At least 2 of them were rendered unusable. Munir realized that he could not win this by climbing the escalation ladder. There was only one way, and that was to get off the ladder. The way was to de-escalate. Thereby, what India managed to do was to get Munir and the Pakistan Army to obey India's red line. India was enforcing a new military doctrine. This suggests that Operation Sindoor may have achieved what no diplomatic maneuver has ever been able to achieve so far. Operation Sindoor has now introduced the element of uncertainty into Pakistan's cost-benefit calculus. For a military establishment in Pakistan that is used to operating below the threshold of open conflict, the prospect of losing control of the escalation ladder, or even worse, of inviting disproportionate retribution, completely changes the game, completely changes the security and strategic calculus. So how will India enforce these new red lines going forward? The answer lies not just in military readiness, but also in a broader national security architecture. Sindoor involved not just missiles and fighter jet capabilities, but also drone surveillance, cyber capabilities, electronic warfare, and real-time satellite intelligence. This multi-domain approach points to a future where deterrence is going to be not just about putting boots on the ground, it's also about controlling algorithms up in the cloud. It is tempting to believe that a single operation, in this case Operation Sindoor, and however bold it was, can fundamentally alter Pakistan's long-standing strategic calculus. That would be naive. Pakistan's reliance on asymmetric warfare is deeply embedded in its military doctrine. The strategic utility of non-state actors, particularly in Kashmir, is still very high. However, what may be changing is the confidence, and some would say impunity, with which these terror attacks used to happen in India on a regular basis. With Operation Sindoor, India has made it clear that this grey zone of plausible deniability is shrinking. Plausible deniability no longer offers protection to Pakistani state players. So safe havens may no longer be safe. Pakistan also has a lot of internal dynamics which it needs to consider. Pakistan is going through a massive economic crisis, multiple bailouts by the IMF and the World Bank. There is political instability. There's also international isolation, all of which limits its bandwidth the next time there is escalation with India. It may well choose to absorb the blow right now and regroup again and inflict another terror attack at a later point of time. However, it may also seek newer and subtler forms of provocation, including cyber attacks, targeted disinformation campaigns, even proxy sabotage. One of the most intriguing aspects of how this crisis eventually de-escalated and how quickly it managed to de-escalate, within 4 days, the dust settled. The ceasefire, however tenuous, is still holding. It's been a week plus now since it's been holding. Both sides are holding off fire, at least temporarily, at least for now. Peace, or the absence of war, has returned quickly and returned abruptly. The timing and manner of de-escalation suggests that there could have been some form of back-channel communication, although India firmly denies any third-party role, including that of the United States, despite US President Trump, in multiple social media posts and also in sound bites, claiming that it was the US that mediated and intervened between India and Pakistan. Operation Sindoor may be remembered as the operation that redefined India's red lines. But drawing new lines, drawing new red lines, is just the beginning. The real test will lie when those red lines are tested again. Will India impose even further costs? Will it hit not just terror targets but also strategic locations deep inside Pakistan, going beyond the remit of Kashmir? Future provocations will challenge India to respond consistently, credibly, and proportionately. The danger lies not in escalating, but in how to control the escalation. Deterrence works best when the consequences of deterrence are clear and visible to the enemy. For now, one thing is amply clear. India has moved past the era of silent endurance, or what some call strategic restraint. India has chosen to speak through action and not words, and in doing so, it has changed the rules of the game. India is now enforcing active deterrence.